Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
There are things that people joke about that are funny, but you really shouldn't do them in real life. And here's one from the Daily Mail. Stephen with a PH sent this to me. Third grade teacher is arrested for being drunk on the job after staff pulled her out of her Oklahoma classroom with a cup full of wine in her possession at that moment. And so Christian Oliver wrote the story. And that's the story. That's the story. It's school starts, and the teacher is pulled out of class, third grade teacher, and she's drunk on the job. And anytime you encounter somebody who's drunk in the morning, you got to ask yourself, when did they start? But, you know, it might be rough teaching third graders. But if you are a third grade teacher and you're not up for the job, you should probably try to find a different job. Third grade teacher arrested for being drunk on the job after staff pulled her out of the classroom and asked her to explain why she had a cup filled with wine in her possession. She's 53 years old, was teaching her class at the intermediate school in Oklahoma when she was taken out of her classroom on the first day to meet with the school's superintendent and a police officer. So your first day on the job teaching children, and you are meeting with the superintendent and a police officer. That's usually a sign of bad things. After drawn-out questioning that saw her take a breathalyzer test and continually deny that she had consumed alcohol, she eventually admitted she had drunk half a box of wine until 3 a.m. that morning. So she's claiming that she did the drinking beforehand, and she had a box of wine. Now, we don't know what year the box of wine is from. I'm not a wine connoisseur, but I understand that it depends on the year, the vintage of that box of wine, as to how good the wine is. However, after the superintendent told her she seemed like, "You're not the same person I talked to this morning," the officer and school administration suggested she'd been drinking since she got to school and since class started at 8:25 that a.m. She was arrested on the anticipated charge of public intoxication. So just being drunk in public. The police department released body cam footage of the meeting showing the teacher and the school administrators and the law enforcement all talking about this issue. A sergeant told Oklahoma City's KFOR, the school administration contacted our school resource officer. When he got there, he saw some signs that maybe she was impaired. In the body cam footage, the superintendent accused her of acting weird and being, quote-unquote, off. She was asked if she'd consider taking a breath test, which she agreed to. She tried to excuse her behavior by claiming she had taken anxiety medication. She said she's unable to present the bottle of medication because she put the anxiety pill in her pocket and had taken it earlier in the day. Now, just so you know, if you're carrying around prescription drugs, you probably want to leave them in the bottle, because if anybody encounters you and you then have to show, well, I've got this pill, but I've got the prescription for it, the bottle's at home. It kind of makes it harder for you to prove that. She then blew a .24, 3 times the legal driving limit of .08. Now, of course, she's not driving, but she's in public and she's teaching children. So she was then asked if she left campus that day and whether there would be any traces of consumed alcohol in her classroom. She said she had not left the school, but did not answer the second question. Is there any alcohol in your classroom? Officer asked her if she drank often, at which point she responded, unfortunately, yes. And then she said she'd been seeing a counselor about it. Now, while she continued to maintain that the last time she drank was 3 in the morning, which would have been many hours before, the superintendent asked whether, in the officer's expert opinion, she was under the influence. The sergeant said, in my honest opinion, I think she's probably a functioning alcoholic. He then checked her eyes by asking her to focus on a pen, and he concluded, yes, she's intoxicated. At this point, they asked her if she needed to have someone come and pick her up and take her home. And she refused to let them call her husband. So a police report obtained by a local news agency recorded a school officer saying, I noticed that she had red, watery eyes and a thick, slurred speech. She had a hard time completing sentences, which again is not a good look for a teacher, an elementary school teacher. She said, I know I've been having a hard time. Am I going to get fired? Answering bluntly, The superintendent said, yes, or you can resign. You're under the influence at school with kids. That's a problem. Still not admitting she'd been drinking since being at school, she questioned whether she could still be recording a high alcohol breath content after drinking last night. And the officer said, well, unless you drank a ton at like 8 o'clock this morning, I don't know how you could still be that high. She continued to claim she couldn't call her husband or a friend, and the officer told her he didn't want it to humiliate her by making the arrest. So they were actually trying to work with her. The superintendent then gathered her belongings for her and returned with a blue cup and asked what was in it. No more games, right? What was in that? She then claimed it was juice. The officer smelled it and said that was wine. Want to try again? She was then told to put her hands behind her back, and she's handcuffed, and she was arrested. Spokesperson for the city said that on Thursday, August 17th, 2023, at approximately 3:20 in the afternoon, school resource officer was contacted by school officials in reference to a teacher that's possibly intoxicated at the intermediate school. Deputy chief contacted the teacher, third grade teacher, and confirmed that she was indeed under the influence of alcohol, blew a .24, placed under arrest, transported to jail on the anticipated charge of public intoxication. And I not really caught that first detail there because it's not noted, but the arrest occurred in the afternoon, 3:20 in the afternoon. Apparently, the principal or administrator had encountered her earlier that day and she did not appear to be drunk. She claims she was drunk from the night before, but then when they checked her cup, it had wine traces in it. So she wound up getting arrested, and they had actually offered to let her leave if she would simply call somebody and get a ride home. Now, it appeared that she realized she's going to lose her job anyway, and at that point, probably in her state of mind with the .24 happening there, she probably thought at this point, what's the difference? Haul me out of here. But she could have avoided the charge, I believe. It sounds like they're going to let her go. So they wound up arresting her and the charge of public intoxication, which means, of course, that she was mugshotted and fingerprinted, and all that's all over the news. And all the stories contain her name, the school. Everybody knows who she is. People who didn't know who she was before now know who she is. She was the drunk third grade teacher. And, we've seen jokes about that. There was a movie starring Cameron Diaz about a bad teacher. Although I don't think she ever showed up for class drunk. I think she showed up hungover. And there's Mrs. Krabappel from The Simpsons, who, again, I don't think she's ever shown up for class drunk, but she certainly showed up hungover. And that's interesting because that's the line even the comedies won't cross. They recognize that it's funny to put a hungover teacher in a classroom filled with 4th or 5th graders or 3rd graders, but it's not funny to put a drunk teacher in the classroom. So this is a strange story. The woman says that she's seeking counseling and getting help. More power to her. I hope she is. And I've mentioned before, I've handled some drunk driving cases in my career, and I've also encountered people just in my life who've had trouble drinking. And there are people who cannot control themselves. They cannot help it. And so if this woman who's 53 years old has been teaching for any length of time, you might wonder what happened prior to this school year starting that caused her to go over the edge, because it presumably hasn't happened in the past where she showed up for school drunk or got drunk during the day while drinking in class. So this one is a bizarre story. And I've mentioned before, my dad taught, my mom taught, my grandparents taught, I've taught. I've got educators all throughout my family. It's the most common profession in my family is education. And so I've got a lot of respect for teachers. They do extremely difficult work. Whenever I meet a 3rd or 2nd or 1st grade teacher, all I can think of is like, wow, how do you do that? How do you do that? And so it's a difficult job. And so I don't doubt that this woman's under a lot of stress, but I suspect there's probably other stuff happening as well. But unfortunately, despite the fact it looks like she could have skated, she got the public intoxication charge. She's got the story here, and she no longer has a job, apparently, teaching the 3rd graders in Oklahoma. So crazy story from the Daily Mail. Stephen with a PH, thanks for sending it. Third grade teacher arrested for being drunk on the job after staff pulled her out of her Oklahoma classroom with a cup full of wine still in the classroom. And her story about, that's from last night, all the alcohol in my system, doesn't quite hold up. So there you go. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. That's right, not even MacGyver could fix this one.